so I can, yeah. How's that? Half an hour is good, yes?
It's just for recording.
This one? Oh, really? Okay, all right, fair enough. No, that's okay. All good, all good. All right, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, I mean. Okay, so who wants to start us off on reading the first, let's do the cornerstone piece. So let's do from verse 1 to verse 10. Or verse 11. Who wants to go for it? Hey guys, come this side. Just for me, Ash, on Coptic, please. Please, go. All right, who's going to read? Thank you.
Therefore, laying aside all malice, all guile, hypocrisy, envy, and all evil speaking, as newborn babes desire the pure milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. If indeed you have tasted that the Lord is gracious, coming to him as to a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by God and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Therefore it is also contained in the Scripture, Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he who believes in him will by no means be put to shame. Therefore to you who believe he is precious, but to those who are disobedient, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumbled, being disobedient to the word to which they also were appointed. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but are now the people of God, who had not obtained a mercy, but now have obtained mercy.
Excellent, thank you. So who here is in construction? Anyone? No? Yeah, this one. Oh, hello. The person the furthest away. See, that's why I need you closer. See, it was meant to be. Go. So, do you guys know what the significance of a cornerstone is in construction? Does anyone have any idea? Yeah, that's right. Foundation stone, exactly right. So it's really interesting that St. Peter uses this kind of analogy or metaphor, I guess, in terms of a cornerstone. And that's, so in construction, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not in construction, but I did some chat GPTing around the significance of cornerstone in construction. And some of the following came up. So, and it was really interestingly profound. So one of the features of a cornerstone is to create alignment and unity. Right? So it actually aligns all the other stones to set in the right place, and so that they can connect together cohesively and essentially be united. Right? So the cornerstone is for alignment and unity. Sound familiar? Okay. So that symbolism is really, really powerful. And when he uses symbolism like that to people that have built with their hands or have, significant, they do a lot of those things themselves, they can relate. They understand, oh wow, that's really significant. So when they, another piece around the cornerstone, it actually, they say, it provides a standard for the other stones. So it's the foundational one that provides a standard for where the other stones sit, how their durability. So that's the next part as well. It's like the most durable, enduring, and non-changing stone. So you can change pretty much most things around when you're constructing, and replace pieces. But that cornerstone, if that can't be moved, the whole structure will fall down. Another thing around it is that, like you were saying, it's the first foundational piece. So it's the foundation of that building. So can you guys tell me what are those symbolisms for, how does Christ fit into all of these things? Who wants to go? So alignment and unity, a standard for the other stones, enduring, unchanging, and foundational. Can you tell me?
Is that how Christ, like you're asking how Christ is like that? Well, Christ is the foundation of our faith.
Yeah.
So like what he said can't be moved or changed. It stays the same. Like Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's right. So the world is changing, we change, everything changes, but Christ stays the same. So like the cornerstone. Right? So that's that foundational piece. And it sets the standard. So whatever changes in our lives, whatever things happen, that he becomes that cornerstone, that anchor, that remaining, that consistent foundation. What else? How else is Christ the cornerstone for our lives? So alignment, unity, providing a standard for the other stones. Tell me. It's only Monday night, guys. Yes, don't put your hand up, just shout out. Go.
Like all things that we do, we measure against the cornerstone. So like we go out to work every day, and we go out to eat, and we go out to have fun or do anything. It's always measured against the cornerstone to make sure that we're in line.
I love that. So it acts as a measurement tool. Christ acts as our measurement tool. So the foundation, so our anchor, right? So no matter what's changing around us, and what I do for work is a change. So around organisational change, behaviour change, all that sort. So I see a lot of change. But where I see things fall apart is when there is no anchor or no cornerstone or no strong foundations. So things like values, things like our beliefs. When that's not set in stone, so to speak, then things fall apart, because then it's like they move wherever the wind takes them and there's nothing solid. However, what Christ tells us is to have the cornerstone, but things around the cornerstone will change all the time, but we need that as our foundation. We need that for alignment, and we need that for measurement, to constantly know, okay, all of this stuff is changing. Am I getting really far off from this cornerstone, or am I still aligned to it? Right? Is the quality, my quality, obviously it will never be as high as the cornerstone itself, but at least I have some sort of measurement to go back to. If we don't have anything to measure against, we will never know whether we're on the right track or not, right? Because then everything around us is going to be a measure. Oh, that stone looks even better than me and shinier and nicer. I want to be like that one. But that one is actually way off, even total different material from the cornerstone. So what am I comparing myself, my stone, with? And who am I comparing it with? And is that aligned to that cornerstone, or is it completely far off in a whole different building? Right? So it's a really powerful symbolism around our foundation, our alignment, and our measurement. Okay. What other thoughts that you have around cornerstone? I think this was probably one of the most powerful points in this section, in this whole 2 chapters. What else? Where does it get tricky for us around sticking to alignment with that cornerstone? Where does it get to, especially at your stage of life right now, where does it get tricky? Where we can sometimes get misaligned with that cornerstone? Peer pressure? Yep. So how do you deal with that given cornerstone? And everyone. Whoever. How do you deal with that?
I think maybe sticking by the morals that you raise up with, hopefully the Christ's morals as well. So sticking by them, not really waving around, finding a grey area, because then that's when the grey area eventually becomes the red area. I don't know, whatever the opposite.
Yeah. should be, right? Yeah. And it should be. But sometimes, unfortunately, in our culture, we mix what we should be doing based on our culture and our upbringing from a cultural perspective rather than from a Christian perspective. And sometimes, believe it or not, they don't actually align. Can you give me any examples where some things that we've been brought up with or culturally actually is not a Christian thinking? You can give me examples.
I think faith in general and trust in external abilities doesn't apply at all. I think most of society teaches you to take control of your life. I mean, it makes sense that a lot of things that happen in our life are a consequence of our actions. It's true in one sense. But to give another being control, to have faith and trust, I think that doesn't align at all.
That's so true. So that sense of control versus letting go, people don't ever tell you to let go. They tell you to control your life and, be on top of everything. So yeah, definitely completely opposing to our society, like how society generally functions. When you say something like, oh, I'm leaving it up to God, they're like, what do you mean you don't have a 3, 6 month and a 1 year and a 5 year and a 10-year plan? What do you mean? Right? So yes, and it's a fine line between, again, like that where the culture is like that inshallah concept, which is God willing concept, right? It's like inshallah, but you haven't done anything to find out what God's will is as well. Like we can't just also completely rely on that, which is where we sometimes fall into the cultural aspect. Like just, so we've got to do our part, but then truly let go. But sometimes we get that blurred where we're like, don't do our part, and we say, God willing, whatever God wants, but God's like, well, I'll put that in front of you, so do it. I've spelt it out for you, but you're not doing it, so you can't just say, leave it up to me. I'm not going to make you do that next thing, right? So, yeah, it's a fine line between doing our bit and actually letting go and putting completely our faith in God with whatever the outcome is. But we mix it up, right? So we don't do it, and they're like, but we want that outcome. Why didn't you give me that outcome? It's totally the opposite, right? What else? How else can we sometimes mix what Christ wants us to do versus what culturally or society tells us? And sometimes what our parents might tell us is actually not necessarily what Christ tells us. Right? Sometimes, what we hear around, it's not actually what a Christ. It's a different cornerstone. It becomes a different cornerstone. We think that's the right cornerstone, but actually, if we dig a bit deeper, it's not necessarily. Right? Things like what success, the measure of success, is even for all of us sometimes, inevitably, our families and the culture that we live in the community, they tell us success equals this, 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 and this, finances, or getting an amazing job, or doing this particular industry, going to this industry and getting a house and having a family. That is success. But is that what Christ tells us is success? What is success according to Christ for us? Selflessness, yeah. In what sense? And how can you do that in a practical way where you can measure success against Him as a cornerstone? Which means it's what type of love? Sacrificial and unconditional, right? But sometimes is that easy to do? No, right? So that unconditional type of love where even no matter who hurts me or who upsets me or who annoys me or who hates me, that I still love them, that's the type of love we're talking about, right? So in our anything that we're doing, are we showcasing that? Whereas the world might ask us to do something very different. Talk, revenge or ignoring the person or any of that sort of stuff. That is opposite to that cornerstone. Right? What else? Did Christ have many earthly possessions? Do we have many earthly possessions? So we're having a discussion or a workshop talk, whatever, around silly stresses. There's a sermon by Abuna Dawood Lamai around silly stresses. And one of the silly stresses was stressing over material or like things or people, like attachments to things and people. And when we stress about attachments, whether things or about people, that's a silly stress, right? According to what Christ tells us. Because there were days, like, has anyone watched The Chosen? No? The Chosen? Bits and pieces, yeah? There's a couple of episodes in there where they're like, we don't have food for tonight. Right? And you just see Christ, like, it's okay, don't worry, it'll come. And they have the Son of God with them, who fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they're like stressing out about not being fed for a night, right? So these are the types of things that Christ tells us to be aware of, that he will always provide, yet we stress ourselves and attach our measure of success sometimes on the things that we have. Oh, I'm successful because I have this car, or I'm successful because I have this. But what cornerstone are we measuring that against? It's certainly not the chief cornerstone, right? So again, what are we measuring in terms of success, in terms of possessions, in terms of attachments, in terms of silly stresses? What are we actually stressing about? Do we lose sleep over, am I going to go to heaven? Or do we lose sleep over, am I don't know, going to get that mark to get into that, or going to get that job, or going to get that car? Or what are we losing stress over? What are we stressing over? Okay, so I think we've put a fair bit into that one. Who wants to read from 13 through to the end of the chapter? Thank you.
Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of men for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Servants, be submissive to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the harsh, for this is commendable. If because of conscience toward God one endures grief, suffering wrongfully. For what credit is it if, when you are beaten for your faults, you take it patiently? But when you do good and suffer, you take it patiently. This is commendable before God. For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who when he was reviled did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, having died to sins, might live for righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. For you are like sheep going astray, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
Okay, let's be realistic around this particular piece. If you're at work and you were, let's hope no one's beaten for their faults, but, if they were suffering wrongly, what would you do? Realistically speaking, if you're at work or at uni or wherever and you're wrongly being accused for things or berated, publicly humiliated, what would you do? What's your humanistic response? All of that is usually.
Stand up for yourself.
And how would you stand up for yourself?
Talk back.
Yeah. Like, who in this day and age will just take it and be beaten for our faults, or take it patiently? Like, it's hard call, right? It's really a hard ask. But there's so many stories, and I know Abuna Ya'ub has shared so many, and a few of the fathers, around this particular point where you suffer and you take it, and then eventually Christ blesses that, right? And it doesn't mean like I guess, we can still stand up for ourselves, but it's not, he's saying here, like, who will not stand up and revile back, or like, hit back the same as they're hit, like we take it differently, right? But also in the service, right? In the service, it's not, sometimes when you're doing a service, it's not an easy, nice, cruisy, get lots of pats on the back kind of service, right? Sometimes it's hard, sometimes you're ridiculed, sometimes you're, belittled, or any of that, whether on purpose or not. Usually it's not, but like it can happen. So it's easier for us to just be like, stuff this, I'm out, see ya, can find someone else. But when we ask for things like patience, long suffering, being faithful, all these things, God puts us in these positions in order to grow those things, right? I was talking to our 8-year-old the other day, and we're going through the fruits of the Spirit. She's like, I really need more patience, Mum. And I'm like, yeah, me too, my love. And she goes, can Jesus just give me patience? I'm like, my love, he's not a fairy that sprinkles patient dust on you. That's not how it works. Usually what he would do is put you in a difficult situation so that you can start practicing your patience. And she just looked at me with the most defeated face, like, really, Mom? Is that the only way? Surely there's another way. Like, that seems really slack, It's really harsh. But it's true, right? We don't just wake up magically and we have all the patience in the world, or all the long suffering in the world, or all the faithfulness in the world. Usually we need scenarios that truly test our faith in order to have faithfulness, or scenarios that really push our buttons and really, like, we need to get that patience in order to practice patience, right? And it's the same here. Christ will put us in situations on purpose sometimes, and sometimes they may seem harsh at the time, but in hindsight, you're like, oh wow, I would not have learnt that particular either fruit of the Spirit or practiced that if I wasn't put in that situation. And he gives us whatever it is that we can handle at that level at that time. He'll never give us something that's way too much that we can't handle it, right? So even though this seems like it's a bit harsh and a bit like, come on, like, really? If they beat me, I'm just going to sit there? But Christ tells us to, like, turn the other cheek, which is very different to the Old Testament, right? It used to be an eye for an eye, but now we talk about turning our cheek when someone slaps us. Like, that's huge, right? And so, again, it goes back to the love point. Like, if we are truly practicing love, unconditional love, then I will show that love. And Christ always shows us, or gives us that mercies, or shows us the blessing at the right time. Not our time, at his right time. Like, I used to have a really difficult uni professor during my PhD, and he was a tyrant, and he had his favourites. And I would prepare this massive paper, and I would go into his office and, in our weekly catch-ups or whatever, because he was my supervisor, and I'd hand it, and he'd just rip it to shreds. I would be like, okay. And out the door, like, oh, I spent weeks on this. It was so unfair. And I would cry, and I'd be upset. I'd come home, and I was probably very hormonal because I was pregnant at the time. But anyway, it was so devastating every time. Every interaction was heartbreaking for me. And I would pray to God. And then there was this one opportunity where this professor did something terrible, like publicly terrible. And so many of the students were so annoyed with him. They're like, we could just report him and he will be out of the university. It was that bad, right? And they're like, we could do it. And I was like, you know what? Yes, he's been horrible to me and he never showed me the favoritism that he had for other students. But I can't be involved in something like that. That's not what Christ would want me to do. And so, like, 4 months later, people forgot or whatever and didn't get traction. But then, a few months later after that, all of a sudden, he's gone. He's gone. No one knows how or what happened. Obviously, someone somewhere out there or some other incident happened and he was reported and he had to go immediately. But like, and he used to tell me, you're never going to get published, essentially. He would say things like that to me. And I ended up being the only student that got published in the journal that none of his students ever got published in because they couldn't. And it was really that moment where I was like, God, yes, you are truly merciful and you are truly amazing, because I was like broken person. But he showed so much of that blessing and that glory, and to the extent where that professor, when he found out, because he'd gone out of the university by then, but I got a professor that was amazing. She was really empowering, she was fantastic, and she pushed me and she helped me, and she was like giving birth and she's replying to my message. She was amazing. So God truly blesses us at the right time, even though at the time I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I'm never going to get this done. I'm never going to be successful in this. Yet God, through that and endurance and not reviling back in the way that the world tells us, he shows his mercy. So it's never hopeless, which is good. All right, last bit. And I'm sorry, can we take 5 more minutes? Is that okay with you? I'm sorry, thank you. I don't want to... All right, so who wants to do chapter 3 up to number 7? Yeah. Wants to go? Yeah.
Wives, likewise, is 1 Peter chapter 3, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be hidden, be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
Okay, ladies, what are your thoughts about that? Say that again. No comment from you. That's right. I used to read that sentence as the weaker vessel. What do you mean we're weaker? We're not weaker. We're stronger. We're going through childbirth, for God's sake. But after being married for 12 years, I have come to the realization in some areas, yes, we are, and we truly need that support. And when you're young and you're like don't need nobody, what are you talking about? After a while, you know, life tests you a bit. And you're like, okay, maybe I do need a few people around me. But, and also, when, you know, this concept of submission, right? Like this concept of submission, you know, we were talking about like societal expectations of things like letting go and giving control. Also, this concept of submission is a very foreign concept in society right now, yeah? What do we all, like, all the rage at the moment? Empowerment, that's right. Yeah, that's it, exactly. Feminism, all of that sort of thing. So, which is not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's also, I feel like there's kind of like this fine line around where we essentially are letting go of what God's intent is for us, and that is that synergy, right? Like we are, you know, when two are married, there's that synergy. They're one body, right? And with that submission, when you found someone who truly is the person that, you know, God intended for you, submission doesn't become submission. It doesn't seem like it's submission. You're both work so synergistically together and have that alignment, if you are aligned to the cornerstone, right? Like, if you're getting a brick from another house, then there's going to definitely be a lack of synergy and, you know, misalignment there. But again, this is a really good measurement coming back to the cornerstone concept, right? What am I comparing my lifelong cornerstone that I'm going to be stuck next to, right? Who am I comparing and measuring that to? Is it the chief cornerstone, or is it some other random, again, shiny thing that's far away? And once we have that alignment around our values, doesn't matter if we're different. My husband and I are like chalk and cheese, very different personalities, and what we like might be a bit different. But again, going back to that root, the anchor, that cornerstone, what are our values rooted in? Are they aligned? If they are aligned, all the rest works and can work, and we can make it work. But if the foundational things are not aligned, that's when the house breaks down. Literally just it breaks down. And anything you try and build on top of that is not going to be on a solid foundation, so it will also break down. We're talking about children or friendships or, you know, building a life together. If it's not set on the cornerstone, it will break down. Right? So what are your thoughts around that submission piece? And boys, you can weigh in too, please. Submission piece, and also around that unity, and then we'll get to the adornment and hair and things like that in a bit. But what do you think around that submission piece? What are your thoughts? Anyone? Is there anything around submission that could be negatively applied or misconstrued in reality? Sometimes it's so it's done so extremely, where, for example, one side, or maybe the wife, or, you know, the partner is just submits everything without actually knowing what's going on, like as in like relies so much without knowing what's going on. And that's when we see issues in marriages later around, you know, wives that have no idea about things like the financial situation of the home, or anything around the paperwork that goes on, or administrative stuff and things like that, where it's like, oh, but he does it, and it becomes more like blind, just reliant so much that it doesn't actually benefit the relationship, and then she can't help out. And it goes other way as well, like sometimes in terms of, from the husband's perspective, everything's, oh, the wife's looking after the kids or doing this and doing that. It becomes like this ignorance rather than submission. All right? Or omission rather than submission. Like, out of sight, out of mind, don't care about it. And this sense of like apathy, like, it's okay, he does it, or it's okay, she does it. But actually, that can cause issues later on. Why do you think that is? Why would that cause issues later on? Really lively bunch today, guys. Thought you guys were young, energetic. Andrew, come over. Yeah, you did. Sure. Where does that become an issue in a relationship?
Probably when it comes to like issues that haven't been spoken about, like say personal issues with like a man or a woman, like the other partner would be able to help as much because they don't really know. Oh, I'm in charge of this. I'm not really in charge of that.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's been a lack of communication around it, so a lack of awareness and lack of even wanting to be aware of it sometimes, that can cause issues, and that means one person can get really fatigued doing the same things over and over, or more things, and then the other person has no idea because they don't talk to them about that because that's their thing. So it's really important, like, to prevent that, for those lines of communication to constantly be open. Now, what about do not let your adornment be merely outward? And I know here it sounds like it's just for women, but hey, boys arrange their hair as well and wear gold, so actually, and fine apparel, so it's totally both ways here. So what is the issue around that, and what does he mean by incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God, compared to that? What does it mean? I know you know what it means. Come on, guys. Oh, really testing me on a Monday afternoon after a full day of meetings, guys. Come on. What does that mean? Like, what is it sometimes that we get caught up with so much? And is that what our chief cornerstone is, again, is that aligned to that? Yeah? And what are we attracted to as well? Like, thinking about things that you get attracted to. Are we attracted to the nice, shiny, lovely things, the beautiful hair, the whatever cars are out at the moment, and shiny gadgets and things like that? It's all joggers now, isn't it? That's the massive thing, right? Like, what do you call them? It's joggers. It's not really joggers, are they? What are they called? Say that again? Not Crocs. Surely that's not in fashion. I'm not that old. Sneakers, like the sneakers. Not any Gazma, not like my Gazma. It's like those funky Gazmas these days. Everyone's hiding their shoes now. Like, no, what are you talking about? So what is it that we are constantly focusing on? I think there's like, we see sometimes like, you can't help but see phases of things coming in, and it's all the rage and everyone's got them and things like that, and we get so consumed with it. So again, it's what are we prioritizing? How are we measuring it? Is it measuring it according to our chief cornerstone? Is it like our chief cornerstone, the same type of substance, or is it totally different? And is that aligning us to those values? Okay, so what are 5 things that we talked about today? Yes, cornerstone. What about the cornerstone?
It's the foundation of the house.
Mhm.
Christ is the foundation.
Yeah, perfect. Good. What else do we talk about? Are you usually this quiet, or is it just me? Is it me? Am I the problem? Yes. So using the chief cornerstone as a measurement to align ourselves. Yep. Perfect. What else? We talk about. Give you some hints. So we talked about submission to our masters and those who we work for. Submission to husbands, adornments. I think I just gave you the last three, but go on. I want to hear it from you. Say that again. Patience will be? Patience when being criticized, knowing that at some point Christ has your back. He will, maybe it's not a vengeance as such, or maybe it is. But whatever it is, we hold fast and be patient and not revile back, because he will show the justice. We don't need to. Another 2 points. If you really want this over, you've got to think fast. It was like, guys, I'm going to pull it. I'm doing everyone's assignment here. All right. Yes, focusing on inward, not outward. And last one. Submission. Yeah, cornerstone. Submission. One line and one words. That's khalas. I got this. What about submission?
You're talking about like how the wives submit to their husband, like making them betray in like the way like it might be done, but like a slave to a master or something like that.
Yeah.
Use
Yeah.
that. That's really not that.
Yeah.
It's just them being there for the husband when they need it.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes both ways as well. The submission goes both ways. So when we're both aligned to Christ, it doesn't seem like submission anymore. It's alignment, it's love, it's just constantly giving of ourselves, and that selflessness that someone mentioned earlier as well. Excellent. Thank you so much. Sorry it took 15 minutes longer, Peter. I apologise, but we got there. Thank you so much. In the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit.
Are there any questions?
Oh, yes, sorry. Any questions? يعني ما كانش في summaries أصلاً. Only questions. Do you think so? Let's be real here.
It is now my requirement to ask if there are any questions.
It's a
my
requirement. Gotcha. Yeah, I've got to tick that box, guys.
Well,
Yeah, questions going once. You can also find me after if it's really troubling you. You don't want to speak out loud. But
Would you please bless us with your prayers?
if you want to hear more of my voice, are you sure about that?
ما طبعا.